Welcome to Freaky Frack. We do talk back. Thank you for joining us in our second episode of the new season.
Hello, my name is Jeff, and I'm Frick.
Hello, my name is Patrick, and I'm Frack. Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back is a show airing once a week where we will discuss different aspects of fandom and how they relate to the gospel. For this season of the podcast, we will be going through the mini series Kingdom Come and how we see lessons from the issues that connect to teachings in the Bible. And just as many of you are, we're also fans of other things. So if you go back in the feed, the first season was the first season of My Hero Academia. And so when we finish Kingdom Come, we're going to go to something else and look at anything from anime, comics, video games, movies, or other things that we are fans of. And we got the name for the show from our father who dubbed us Frick and Frack since we were kids.
We are now on to the second issue of Kingdom Come, which is entitled Truth and Justice. It opens with Norman continuing to be disoriented by his new status as a witness while traveling with the Spectre. A hero, Americommando, sets himself up to go after the immigrants trying to get into the United States. His reasoning for attacking them is that America is not as big as it used to be, and they're unable to feed all of these people with Kansas now gone. Superman and his new league arrive and make short work of the attackers. And after the attack, Superman makes a declaration that they are sorry for their absence and that the rise of heroes that have abused their powers and do not use them responsibly will fall in line by force if necessary. The UN is not pleased with this announcement, and Norman and the Spectre can feel the fear in the room because it has been confirmed that they no longer are in control of the fate of humanity. It is appearing more and more that it is falling into the hands of powered individuals. Superman then goes to try and recruit Batman into the new league, but Batman steadfastly refuses. Norman questions if Batman and Superman were ever actually friends, because during their conversation, it is apparent that the rift between Bruce and Clark has only widened during Superman's exile. Superman and his new Justice League grow as they either negotiate peace with heroes or force them into submission. Norman and the Spectre arrive to find villains forming up to build the Mankind Liberation Front, which is led by none other than Lex Luthor. In the meeting, it is discovered that the MLF's goals are to bring the human metahuman crisis to a head, with mankind gaining control over the world, and presumably with the villains of the MLF in control. During this meeting of the MLF, it is also come to the attention of the reader that villains have been renamed and given new gear in order to infiltrate the heroes. They in fact make up 8% of the the superhuman population. Luthor announces he has an alliance in place as well as a contingency plan to deal with Superman and the Justice League. Superman arrives at a metahuman bar, making a pitch to the heroes there, informing them that they have the opportunity to join the League, but they will have to follow their rules, and if you don't join, you will be forced to follow their rules. Green Arrow shows up after Superman leaves the bar and begins a pitch of his own. Superman and the League have grown greatly in size to the point where that they now begin to make an impact on a global scale, not reserving themselves to just America. Although Superman is obviously frustrated because although a number of heroes do fall in line, it appears that most heroes are actually being turned into captives than converts. This leads to Wonder Woman revealing a plan with Superman as they meet with Aquaman. Not only does Wonder Woman pitch for Aquaman to rejoin the League, she also hopes that they can use Atlantis as a penal colony for those that don't fall in line with the new League standards. Aquaman rejects both. During their meeting, it also comes out that Diana is no longer welcomed at Paradise Island and has been stripped of her heritage, royalty, and role as an ambassador. Magog is found in Kansas, stating he never left after the parasite incident. It is also revealed to the reader the reason for Superman going into exile. It is in fact due to the Joker. because he killed the staff of the Daily Planet, including Lois Lane. And after Joker kills all of these people, Magog is actually the one that finds Joker first before Superman and Batman, and decides to take justice into his own hands and kill the Joker. Superman believed that Magog should have faced justice for killing the Joker, but the justice system disagreed. Magog was considered a hero, and Magog wanted the torch officially passed from Superman with a title fight, but Superman declines and goes into exile instead. And the issue ends with the alliance that Luthor talked about earlier being revealed that it was actually with Batman and his group of growing fighters and heroes.
So there's a lot of interesting things that have happened in this issue that, I mean, we could talk forever about this issue. And so luckily we pared a lot of this stuff down, because there was stuff that was like, okay, we could go more into these themes in later issues, because they'll come back and things like that. So one of the first things I noticed that I love, I'm just going to keep gushing about Alex Ross's art throughout this entire miniseries. But anyway, so you turn the page and you see the 7 flying members of the Justice League. But then you include the one normal person in the group later, when when the Justice League confronts the Americommando and his Minutemen and stuff like that. And it's in this Justice League lineup. It's initially Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, the Alan Scott version, Flash, who's Wally West, Hawkman, Ray, Power Girl, and then Red Robin, who is Dick Grayson. This is by far one of the most powerful Justice League lineups ever. And I'm not even taking into account that Superman is actually even more powerful than he is in his younger days, because he's actually more powerful. He's stronger. He's more invulnerable. He's faster. Everything.
Superman is definitely powered up in this, and that's something that you'll actually see explained further into further issues. They'll discuss that they don't even think kryptonite even affects him anymore. He's absorbed this much sunlight, so he's basically like he's permanently this powerful. So this is an incredibly powerful lineup. It is very daunting, and so you really couldn't ask for a much better lineup if you're creating the Justice League
for pure power's sake. Though, so that's one of the things that we have to take into consideration. It's one of those things that people always complain about, the non-powered people being on the league, but they do provide necessary things as well. Like, you've got to have the grounded people and stuff like that. And so continuing with this Justice League team, the Flash is interesting. We didn't really cover it all that much in the previous issue because he wasn't in all that much. But the Flash, one of the cool things is that he is so fast that he is actually able to fly in this series. And one of the things that I love about him is that he is always in motion and he's never still. Like, he's always in it. Like, you could always see like 3 of him. And so this is the Wally West Flash. And I can't remember if I think really to get more about Wally's story, you have to read the Kingdom, like one shot, or maybe it might be a miniseries of Iris West and her role as the Kid Flash, to get a better understanding of what Wally has gone through. But he's always much. He's become that much with the Speed Force or something like that.
And similar has happened with Alan Scott as well. In this version of Alan Scott as this version of the Green Lantern, he's actually much closer in line with the Green Lantern Corps, involving like Hal Jordan, Guy Gardner, John Stewart, Kyle Rayner, that version of the Green Lantern Corps. He's not. He to me in this series, he's not really in line with the Alan Scott version of Green Lantern from the Golden Age, where he has the star, he's tapped into the star hard and he has this vulnerability to wood. He seems like he's more in line with the Green Lantern Corps that is the more modern take, which involves the core and that sort of stuff. Because he's actually, and he's even powered up as well, because he's actually fused himself with his own power battery, so he doesn't have the time, the power constraint that he used to, like where he'd have to recharge all the time. He's fully charged at all times. So again, this is just going on further explaining how this lineup is supercharged when you're with just these two that we're talking about, with Wally having an even greater connection with the Speed Force to the point where he's not in one place anymore. He's in multiple places at once. And then Alan Scott is fully tapped into his battery and fully embracing the being a Lantern.
And so, and you can tell that this is a problem with their power levels, because when Superman goes to recruit Batman, he declines. I mean, for lots of different reasons, but I love that Bruce, being the obstinate, stubborn person he is, refused to not to stop. He refused to stop calling him Clark. He was like, "I'm always going to be calling you Clark," and he gets away with it. And
because he's Batman.
Exactly.
But it's great. It shows the difference of his relationship. Like, in the first issue, Wonder Woman, when she approaches Superman, she calls him Clark, and there's that very obvious disdain that he's called Clark by Wonder Woman, and he says, "No, call me Cal." And then even in this issue, you see Wonder Woman call Superman Cal, short for Kal-El, and Superman makes that request of Batman and says, "Call me Cal," and he's like, he makes it a point the next time he speaks, he calls him Clark again. And again, it's Batman trying to remind Superman, it's just like, you lived as a human. You're more human than you are Kryptonian. It's like, yes, you have all of these powers, but you're not really it's like, that's part of what it is. It's like, you're not really Kryptonian. You're human. You were raised by humans. You have all these great gifts, yes, but he's human in his eyes. And also he just wants to irk him. That's obviously, part of it.
Well, that, and he also points out the, Superman's quote unquote dark side, because he got rid of the yellow in his symbol and added black, and the S is much more slanted.
It's harder. Yeah, it's harder.
It's not like an S anymore. It's a very,
it's not the loopy S that we're used to seeing. It's a much harder.
It's almost like a Z.
Yeah.
And in this we get the, Bruce is, continuing to egg Superman, and points out how Metropolis and Gotham have flipped, because they'd always in comics, they'd always been polar opposites. Metropolis was this booming city of light and happiness and where the future was, and Gotham was this dark, dungy place filled with corruption. And I mean, like, people should not live in Gotham City. And where now Bruce is like, while you've been gone, Gotham's practically a utopia compared to Metropolis.
Although Superman does point out, it's just like utopia looks like a police state,
right?
Because you see Batman is monitoring all of his little bat robots and all that stuff that are just, he even talks about, it's like unit this number, maneuver 12, and all these sort of things. And So it's, utopian. And again, it's just proving further and further just how much Superman and Batman have gone in separate directions as to how they want to deal with things.
Right. And just the extremes in general. And it's just it's amazing. And it's funny reading this. And I don't know if you're still watching the Superman and Lois show, Jeff. Um,
I
but
am.
uh, I remember watching the episode when Kilgrave, is it Kilgrave?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kilgrave is being transferred because Metropolis no longer feels safe because Superman is spending so much more time with his family, and and so he's like Intergang's doing more, and Sam Lane lists off all these different crime organizations that are doing more, and because they've noticed you're not there as much, and it's just really funny. And I think that was one of my favorites. It's probably the only thing that I really liked out of Bendis's run on Superman and Action Comics, where that villains specifically set up a monitoring of Superman. It was like, oh, he's in space. Okay, do these dirty deals, blah blah blah, or
Mhm.
and things like that. And so I think that's one of the. I think that was the only good thing that Bendis did, personally. I mean, I had to stop reading. It was just so bad. Um, and
Yeah,
so,
just as a side note, doesn't involve Kingdom Come. If you want good Superman stuff, I do highly recommend the Superman and Lois show. I will say this: his costume is awful. I have seen better costumes at Comic Con than the costume that Tyler Hoechlin is currently wearing, because it literally looks like a costume that they went to Party City and bought. However, Tyler Hoechlin, I believe that's how you say his last
I
name,
think it's Hecklin.
Hecklin.
I
Sorry,
think.
Tyler Hecklin is, in my opinion, the best Superman since Christopher Reeves, bar none. I genuinely believe he's the best Superman since Christopher Reeve.
And he's a very good one. I'm. Ugh, that's a tough call. Um,
And don't get me wrong, I've liked other interpretations of Superman. I've enjoyed I think Brandon Ruth's interpretation of Superman is highly underrated. I think
yeah,
it's very good.
he just got dumped in a crappy movie.
Exactly. He got the short end. He got a very boring movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Andrew
I
Garfield as being Spider-Man. He was actually a really good Spider-Man. He just had a.
he was a horrible Peter Parker. Um, but he but and it's like I enjoyed Brandon Ruth. I've enjoyed Henry Cavill as Superman. I have genuinely enjoyed it. Um, but Tyler just really knocks it out of the park, in my opinion, because he just, he plays that when he's in the Clark Kent mode and not like actual Clark, but like Clark Kent public mode. He's all like goofy, he's a little goofy
Nerdy.
and stuff like, and nerdy and that sort of stuff, to draw away the attention of the fact that he is Superman. But when he, and some of this also is too, it's like, watching him appear in like the Supergirl show, and then the CW crossover stuff when he appears in that, he just knocks it out of the park. He absolutely kills it as Superman. So
Yeah.
if you, anyways, that's my little soapbox moment there for this episode. Yeah, if give him a shot. He's phenomenal.
Yeah. Um, and so this is uh, during the after the Batman and Superman conversation. Uh, this is when they realize that Wonder Woman is a potential problem. Like they really kind of like hone in on that she is especially when you find out that she's lost her ambassador of peace status, and is no longer able to go back to Themyscira. Um, so all she has left is war. Like I love that they talked about her paradox that she is an ambassador of peace, but also a master of war. And so she's lost the ambassador of peace part. And so now all that's left of her identity is master of war. And you start seeing that coming out. And it starts in this issue
Mhm. and it begins to influence Superman as well.
Absolutely. And so it'll be it, and it's going to get played out in these couple issues, and it's fascinating when you get all these Elseworld stories, and Kingdom Come is up there, and Elseworld stories, and another one that is another great one is Red Sun, and how Wonder Woman is different in both of these uh, stories, yet similar, but how they are portrayed differently. Um, and
And we don't
so,
want to necessarily go into that too much because maybe we'll just get around to covering Red Sun because that's also one of my favorite stories.
yes,
Like
but we will not cover the animated movie because that animated movie was awful.
Oh, it's trash. Absolute trash.
Skip it.
It was causing me physical pain.
It was really bad.
But the comic is awesome. Comic is amazing.
Comic is absolutely amazing. Get the comic. Nigma.
Edward Nigma was, in all honesty, he's probably, to me, it's the highlight of this particular issue because he's just, and it's like, and one of the things too, he's
in this issue.
and this is a phenomenal issue. But he serves a couple of dual purposes because there's, and when the MLF meets, there's a couple of people that are mentioned by name that even it's like, I'm a huge comic book nerd. Even I would be like, who? It's like, when they mention like the non-villain name of Cobra, and in fact, I'm actually blanking on this name now. I think Naga, is that what they call him?
I think that sounds right.
And then they also mention, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name, but the heir to Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul. Sorry, apologies. That's his proper pronunciation. They've butchered it and other stuff, but his proper pronunciation, we actually talk to the people that created him, that sort of stuff. His name is actually Ra's. Ra's kingdom in the League of Assassins is introduced, but so he helps introduce all these villains in case you're not super familiar. But then he's just like constantly, and Luthor even says, like, you're only here because Catwoman wants you here. So whether they're dating or married or whatever, I don't know. They don't really explain, but he's only there because Catwoman deems him worthy to be there. And he just has these moments, and he pokes at Luthor the entire time. And when the plan of the MLF is revealed, and the fact that they're, it's like it's even brought up that there are supplies and that should be going out to the people that are suffering from what happened in Kansas, but they're holding it up intentionally. Like they're purposefully not distributing these supplies to these people, only because their goal is to, Luthor recognizes that the human meta-human divide is coming to a head, and he's brilliant. Like, Lex Luthor is genuinely brilliant. He's a brilliant human being, and they want him to, and so he's making a play in this scenario that, all right, if we give out the supplies, the hatred for metahumans will probably wane a little bit. But if we continue to withhold these supplies, it's going to make people even more upset with the metahumans, which is what we want, because we can get everybody to hate metahumans, and then we can go ahead and get this war over with, and then be in charge. Yeah. And Enigma has this great line in it. He when this is revealed, Nigma's like, when is a villain not a villain? And then Luthor, playing into Nigma's pathos here, or methodology, that, and he answers the riddle when he labors for a greater good. So even though Nigma is kind of like being this voice of reason here, saying it's like, we're doing these horrible things, even though we have access to them. So why on earth are we doing it? It's like, for the greater, it's like Luthor's basic sounds like, this is for the greater good. And this is what actually makes it. this is what makes villains. This is what happens when you have good villains, and the fact that when the villain believes he's the hero, it makes the story that much more compelling. Wouldn't you agree, Pat?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things like, Nigma, like I love that he's in his like Riddler mode and he doesn't break character except for, as Jeff said earlier, when they're talking about how they've delayed resources to help people in need. And he's like, hey, you're doing what? And he just loses it. And I was like, oh, the Riddler is really upset. And I
Yeah.
just and that's one of those things like this is an interesting Selena Kyle that they have in this because she's like all on board from what I can tell. I can't. It's been a while. Like I haven't finished the miniseries because I don't want to have too much remembrance of what's happened because I used to read this thing on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Um, and so
I used to read it at least once a year, if not more.
yeah, when my collection was much smaller, I read it more often. Um, uh, but, and I had more free time. Um, and so, anyways, I just love this, what he did. But then I love during I don't know if it was this meeting or if it was the second time you meet up with the Mankind Liberation Front, where Lex throws a tantrum
It's the
about
first time.
it's the first time when when he says like he will not touch me. I was like,
Yeah.
I wonder what happened that made him
Yeah.
all like, man, baby. Because it was like, because Luther himself doesn't lose his cool very much. And
Yeah.
this was big.
He genuinely loses his cool at the very mention of Superman. And it's like, and they don't even mention like Superman laying a hand on him. He's like, but no, he's like screaming at him while getting a shave with a straight blade, by the way, which is also pretty baller. But he's like, he will not touch me. And so it's just like, it just shows how much where Batman views Superman as as human by calling him Clark. Lex Luthor views Superman as this like this alien, this somebody that doesn't belong, and he's actually a hindrance for humankind. And it's awesome to see, because as the issue at the end of the issue is revealed, is Batman and Lex Luthor are actually forming an alliance for the sake of humanity. And so, but it's just funny to see that Batman and Luthor see Superman so very differently. Batman sees him as this human, and Luthor sees him as an alien that he's like, I don't. It's like I hate the very idea of you even touching me.
Yeah. And so we get a few scenes in this issue with at the MetaHuman bar that is just full of Easter eggs, and I mean, you could play Where's Waldo with the scenes in the MetaHuman bar forever. Um, and one of the things that I love is that it's Captain Cold and either Weather Wizard or the Top. I can't tell. I'm leaning towards Weather Wizard because he's wearing a mask, and Weather Wizard wore a mask, and Top was kind of iffy about wearing a mask. So I'm leaning towards Weather Wizard. Are the bartenders, and I think the way I'm perceiving this is that Solomon Grundy is the bouncer of the bar, although he's in a tux, so I'm not really sure. There's so many cool characters in there. Lobo's in there, and I love his T-shirt. I think it says, "What it says? Bite me, fanboy."
Bite me, yeah, bite me, fanboy.
There's an old man creeper, and I'm just going to call him that, old man creeper, because I mean he's an old man and he's a creeper. Plastic Man is there, and he's being like, looks like he's trying to be drawn and quartered almost. I mean, that was weird.
Yeah. It definitely comes when that scene involved with Plastic Man. He's being stretched out like Stretch Armstrong. It does not. The way that the scene is depicted, it's not outright stated, but the way it's depicted is that it is definitely against Plastic Man's will that they're doing this. So it's like they're almost playing with him. It's kind of like, oh, hey,
Let's mess with the old man.
Yeah, let's mess with Plastic Man. And Yeah, and I do like Lobo's. I don't know if this was intentional with the way that they designed Lobo, but does he not remind you of Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice?
A little. I was actually going with he's kind of a little bit of oh gosh, who's that character from King of the Hill? Um, the
Oh
bald,
yeah,
portly one who's an idiot. Well, I mean, they're all kind of dumb in their own way, but gosh, what's
except Hank. Hank is actually smart.
yeah? Let me
Yeah, I forget. Well, there's Boomhauer is the
yeah, and I know a Boomhauer. He's actually a very dear friend, and I love him dearly. But yeah. Anyways, um,
but yeah, so there's a lot of there's a lot of cameos in this, and one of my favorite cameos in this is Marvin, who if you are familiar with one of they went through so many different name changes uh, for the Super Friends, so it's really challenging for me to keep straight all the different changes that they went through. But Marvin shows up in Kingdom Come, and you don't see his face because he's like drinking heavily and it gets blocked out by other stuff. But you see his T-shirt with his M symbol underneath the leather jacket, and so that's just, and again, this is like these little things that I just absolutely love from Alex Ross's artwork. You see Marvin, and another call to the Super Friends. You actually, when at the UN building where Superman and the Justice League make their declaration that they're back, is actually the UN building is actually designed to look like the Hall of Justice from the Super Friends.
sorry. Okay, it's Bill. Bill is the one that I was thinking of that Lobo reminded me of. All right. Ooh, some of my other favorites that you can see there's an old man, Captain Boomerang. There's potentially an Icicle, maybe Icicle Junior. But there's so many others. I think you see like Catwoman's daughter or something like that. You can see her kind of clinging to a pillar. I think that's her, among so many others at the Metahuman Bar.
And then we're officially kind of introduced to Nightfire, as well as the child of Big Barda and Mr. Terrific, not Mr. Terrific. Um, oh man, why am I blanking on him?
Uh, um, Mr. Miracle.
Mr. Miracle. There we go. Wow, oh gosh, I feel embarrassed that I blanked on that. But yeah, you introduced to Big Barda's and Mr. Miracle's child, and then we're also revealed that um, we're introduced officially to Nightfire. She's not called Nightfire in this, but that's her name, and because she's the child of Starfire and Dick Grayson, and both of them are actually considering joining the League until Ollie shows up and he makes a pitch to him.
Yeah. And so Aquaman is one of my favorite superheroes, and it's in large part due to Peter David's run on Aquaman. And so the scene that he's in this series does a great job of talking about how busy Aquaman is, because he protects 70% of the world on his own. He's like the only, other than him and his Aqualad, Mara, and depending on who you ask, there's Dolphin and a couple others. There's not a whole lot of heroes in the ocean, and so he protects the oceans on his own. Then he fights in the battles on the surface from time to time, especially when he's a member of the Justice League. So he's super busy, and Peter David really dives into this quite a bit in his work on Aquaman, and it's really good. Actually,
I'm sure that influenced, Peter David's run heavily influenced their depiction of Aquaman in this, because I mean it's coming out at the same time that that Peter David's run was going on at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's going to heavily influence it.
Yeah, and so I highly recommend it. Picking up, there's two volumes of Peter David's Aquaman that you can pick up. I highly recommend them. They're really good. I mean, it's basically it's got the action, it's got romance. There's so much political intrigue. I cannot encourage you enough to read it. And it's funny when people think of the '90s and comics, they think of Image and they think of the X-Men, and
Yeah,
and but what was
especially
going
the Age
on,
of Apocalypse stuff.
yeah, the Age of Apocalypse, but also there's like a billion X-Men titles
Yeah,
and all this stuff. But DC during the '90s was awesome because you had Aquaman, you had basically anything Peter David was doing during the '90s was amazing. But you had Aquaman, you had Young Justice, the Superman books were really good. Um, Eventually, you get the Grant Morrison's Justice League. Um, I mean, there's just so much good DC from the '90s, and they need to milk that a little bit better, in my opinion. Um, One of the things that you know is we kind of teased it in the last issue, but in this issue, we find out what happened to Lois. Not necessarily the specifics. Um, I think we'll get that in the next issue. What actually specifically happened between Joker and the Daily Planet, but we find out that Joker did in fact kill Lois, and
well, he killed the entire staff of the Daily Planet. Magog says it's 92 men and one woman, and that
yeah,
one woman being Lois.
yeah,
And so
and so we find out that's what happened, and that's just heartbreaking. And you just gotta feel
yeah,
for him.
and earlier in the issue, before this is revealed, as to before we know what happened to her, the Spectre even says that one of the things that's really why Wonder Woman is able to influence Superman so much and appeal to his alien heritage is that he doesn't have Lois there anymore to keep him grounded, to keep him steady, with the idea that he needs, that human connection, that human interaction, is really what's causing him to go to go to this extreme. Because there's beautiful point where Superman is just really frustrated that people don't the other powered people, the other heroes don't view the world like he does, and that it's like he's this force for good. He wants to protect people. He only wants to help uplift people, and that other people that are that are powered aren't seeing it like him, and it's really frustrating him. It's like, why do they not see the world like me? And so it even they even bring up this is like the social arena was never Superman's thing. All he cared about was trying to help people. He just wanted to make sure that people could live a peaceful life, and he would do whatever it takes to make that happen. But now he's becoming, to even point out, it's like with the way that he's going after all of these metahumans, all these powered individuals, he's becoming a global leader. Like he has a huge presence, and it's like they even bring this up a little bit when they show up in front of the UN. It's like, hey, everybody, shut up, hold page one. When Superman talks, we listen. That's what happens. And so he's becoming a political figure, even though Superman has no desire to be a political figure. Like it's not in him. He doesn't care about that. That's not what he cares about, and that's one of the things that is so great about this story is that Superman he's visibly uncomfortable with what's happening, and you see this happen time and again in this issue in particular. He's like, I don't like where this is going, and I unfortunate and but then you see at the end of the issue he actually kind of starts to embrace a little bit more when Magog fights him, and he just brushes off the attack, and he's just like, all right, we're at war. And then they begin to build a prison.
Yeah. And so this
And
is
and the fight with Magog, when all of this when what's happened with what revealed Superman going into exile and all this stuff is revealed, there's actually some great social commentary that Mark Waid puts out there, that so often what happens with us, like, because Magog basically blames, he says all this is your fault, Superman, all of it. The fact that Kansas is destroyed, and that it's like I brought all of these souped up powers to go souped up superpowered people to go after Parasite, who was nothing. He was a shell of his former self. It was overkill. um Kansas is, a million people died because of his actions, but it's still Superman's fault. It is all Superman's fault because Superman didn't want to adjust to the times. He refused to kill people, even though that's what society was calling for him to do. Society wanted Superman to become a killer. It's like Superman's like, no, I'm not a killer. I will not adapt to these times. And so when even the one instance where you could see Superman bending his rule to kill one person, when he kills his wife, or I would imagine is his wife in this elsewhere. They don't ever. I don't know if they ever specifically say that Lois is his wife, but he loves her. He loves Lois, and is killed by the Joker, and he still refuses to kill the Joker. But Magog is willing to.
Well,
Magog
here's
is
one thing though, is that we actually don't know what Superman would have done because Magog got to him first.
exactly that is true, and
Because the counter to that is that in the Injustice, that's what happened, is that Joker killed Lois and Superman ends up killing Joker because he gets him.
well,
I know
well,
that's
the
convoluted thing.
the full story of that in the Injustice is that Lois is pregnant with her and Superman's child, and what winds up happening is that Joker messes with Superman's mind, that to the point where Superman is hallucinating and actually winds up killing Lois. So Superman actually killed Lois, but it's because of the Joker that he killed his wife and unborn child. So then he goes and kills Joker. So the world is a little different.
Right, yeah.
The circumstances are a little different, but you're right. We don't know exactly what Superman would have done in this scenario because he doesn't catch the Joker, but he even says Magog needs to go on trial. Like he fights and thinks that Magog should face justice because he murdered the Joker. And so but again, it's just the social commentary is more about what I'm more concerned with in this scenario, and that Magog, even though he knows he's responsible for this for what happened with Kansas, it's on him. That's on him. Those were his decisions. He became the forefront, the new poster child for the superhero community. So people started to follow his lead. He was harsher. He's willing to kill than Superman was, but what happened is just eating him alive, and it's very visible that he's just absolutely killing himself for this. But he's still holding to that this is Superman's fault. And we have to think about think about 99% of us in this world. 99% of us are in the situations that we're in because of decisions and actions that you made. But how often do we actually look at ourselves in the mirror and say, yep, this is my fault. I'm here because of decisions I made and choices that I made and actions that I took. And how often, instead of standing up and taking it and shouldering it, we say, no, this is your fault. How often do we try and pass the blame, pass the buck of our problems and say, well, I mean, it's my parents' fault. They raised me this way. It's their fault that I'm like this. Well, after a certain point, you can't blame your parents for your mistakes that you made. So it's a great commentary that, and again, he's, and Mark Waid's not even being like overhanded with the writing or anything like that. It's just like, it's like Magog needs to face up to what he did. It's like these choices that he made are it's as a result of his choices. And it's like, yes, Superman wasn't exiled and wasn't able to stop any of this stuff, but he looked around the world, and it's like the world outgrew him. So it's like, all right, you don't want me around, you don't need me, fine, I'm done.
I retire.
I retire. And so it's a great comment on the way that we're, it's and again, mind you, it's like this was written in the late 90s, so this is not, this is not even in today's society where we see this even more. It's just like people and in society today are taught to blame and look for other people to blame for their problems, instead of realizing, oh, I've made some horrible decisions, and this is why I am the way that I am, and this is why I'm in this situation, because I've made horrible decisions. And it's like, and don't get me wrong, I do understand and recognize that there are people in this world that they're in horrible situations because of other people's actions. I do 100% believe that, and I do recognize it. However, most of us are not in that boat. Most of us you're in the situation you're in because of decisions and actions that you made. And it's amazing that in these like 2-3 pages that this happens, Mark Waid is making all of these comments. And that's just showing like how masterful Mark Waid can be as a writer.
Yeah, and there's even subtle things in here about Magog that you might not even necessarily see or you might not pay attention to because it's not main story of Magog versus Superman. But notice that Superman, when he's farming, he's able to succeed at doing all these things. Magog is trying to rebuild Kansas one house at a time, apparently. He's like, all right, let's put this down. And he's performing a humongous feat of super strength. And he's carrying a house. He's like, all right, gentle. And then it crumbles because he can't be gentle. He can't do those kind of things. And so that's one of those things that it's a great comparison and contrast to Superman, who also has great power but is able to be gentle. And that is just, it's not in Magog's wiring. He's not a gentle person. Like, if he's going to be a hero, he's going to obliterate everything in his way to get it done, instead of figuring out a way to be gentle. Like Superman, in the beginning of this particular issue, Wonder Woman puts a guy through a pole or a wall, and it almost takes out an old lady, and Superman's like, no, sanctity of human life, and shields her and saves her and things like that. And where that, like, Magog would have fit more in with what Wonder Woman was doing, and not doing those things, and being violent and not caring about bystanders, where Superman is, we have to be gentle. Now, granted, Superman is starting to lose that. And so that's one of those things that for us to really look at it and see the comparisons and the contrasting of heroes against other heroes. And so like what we did last episode, we kind of talked, because each issue kind of starts with some scripture from Revelation. And so this issue starts with pieces from Revelation chapter 8, verse 2-6. And it's actually a little bit more straightforward than it was in the very first issue, because it was from this verse in Revelation, and then it was this verse, and it was this verse. That formed the coherent story. This is just more straight up Revelation 8, 2-6. I recommend reading it. There's some really cool things in this, but I'll let you guys read that on your own. Revelation 8, 2-6. But the biblical theme that I wanted to touch in was a quote from Bruce, where he says, right now the metahumans have the keys to Earth's kingdom. Wresting control is a delicate matter. And this made me think of Matthew 16, 18-20. And this is what the gospel said. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. So that's this is after Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Son of God. And Jesus tells him that, tells Peter's like, you are going to be the cornerstone, the foundation of the church on earth, and gives him the keys to the kingdom. Now, here's the thing about Peter. I love Peter dearly, but I refer to him as foot and mouth Peter, because he will do something right, and then he'll take 2 steps back. So he did the right thing here, but then just after this, after being told, he's like, you're going to have the keys to the kingdom. And he goes and then Jesus then prophesies and tells them, he's like, listen, I'm going to die. And then Peter tells him, like, no, not the Messiah, not you. You're not going to do that. And he basically tells Jesus that he's going to be the Messiah wrong. He's like, no. He mansplains to Jesus. I don't know if I used that term correctly or not, but whatever. He tells Jesus that he's being the Messiah wrong, and that's not right. And then, so here you go. And it's this guy, he's giving the keys to the kingdom, and it's one of those interesting things with Peter is that he is a person who tries. He is so earnest, and he tries so hard to do the right thing, yet he always kind of does the wrong thing. Even though his intentions are noble, they're pure. Well, they're not necessarily pure, but they're noble, they're well-intentioned, and he doesn't use the keys very well sometimes. It's not until after the coming of the Holy Spirit does Peter really kind of get his act together.
Well, and even then he messes up. Paul puts him in his place.
Oh yeah,
when
absolutely.
When you read the Acts of the Apostles, Paul puts him in his place.
Oh, absolutely. Although you do have to give Peter props. He does do the first preacher joke. And so that's,
It's like, it's too early for us to be drunk. Yeah. I love that he doesn't even flat out say that, but when you read the Acts of the Apostle, when he does his preachers, it's like, they're talking, and he it's like they're speaking in tongues, like they're speaking in all the tongues of all the different languages of the people and the different dialects of all their audiences. And there's no way all these stupid fishermen could be speaking to us in all these different languages. They have to be drunk. And Peter's response is basically, it's like, dude, it's too early. we haven't had enough time. It's like, we wouldn't have had enough time to be drunk.
Yeah. Like, come back at 3. We'll be drunk for that show. Yeah. Anyways, and so back to this lesson. So right now, the metahumans have the keys to Earth's kingdom. And that's really important for us to understand, is that, we are, as Christians, as followers of Christ, we have a responsibility. We have been given the keys to the kingdom. We know what life is supposed to be like because we've read the scriptures, we've read the Bible, and we follow Jesus. We are trying to keep ourselves in tune with the Holy Spirit and following the Holy Spirit's path. Yet we fight and we argue and we belittle people, and we as Christians and as churchgoers and followers, we have stopped being of the kingdom and we started being of the world. And so the keys to the kingdom are being used improperly. We're not being the Christians we're supposed to be. We're letting culture dictate who we are supposed to be as Christians, instead of using scripture, the Holy Spirit and God telling us who we're supposed to be as Christians. And that's a really great lesson for us as Christians with the current generation of heroes that Superman is disappointed in and disgruntled with. He's like, that's us. that can be us. Now we can be great. We can have our moments where we're doing the right thing, but we're so being influenced by the culture of the world that we're losing that. We're losing ground, and we're not being who we're supposed to be. And that's something really important for us to understand, that our identity as Christians is not wrapped up in what political party we're a part of, and things like that. That's not what it's about. Our duty as Christians is what Jesus has commanded of us, in the Great Commission, that we're supposed to go into all of the nations and making disciples of Jesus Christ, baptizing them into the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We're supposed to be doing these things, and not saying it's like, oh, well, this is the current culture, so we should do things this way. No. Jesus gave us specific instructions to follow, and we're supposed to follow them because He's entrusted the keys of the kingdom to us. So, how would you rate this issue, Frick?
I know we normally go on a scale of 5. I know in the first issue I gave it a great old big old 6. I'm not going to give this one a 6, but I will give it a 5.25. Because again, it's like, and it's like what I just love about this issue is like you can just tell that everything is boiling at the surface. Like, it's like it is about to get ugly, and it is, and it will. It's going to get very ugly when it's all said and done. But like in this issue in particular, it's really starting to set that up. It's like you can tell it's like Superman's ticked off because people are. It's like people are expecting him to become this world leader. He doesn't want to be a world leader. He just wants heroes to act like freaking heroes. And they won't. They're acting like idiots, and they're acting like villains, which we also did find out that some of the heroes are actually villains. But it's, there's just the art is still beautiful. It's phenomenal artwork by Alex Ross. And you can it's just phenomenal. And and again, I'll give it I'll break the scale, and it's going to be a 5.25.
I'm going to give this issue a 5 as well. I mean, it's the first issue is great and phenomenal and a masterpiece. This issue is even better, even though it can be slightly disorienting because of all the location jumps in it. But you kind of got a handle on things, and it's just really great seeing the world being explained. Like you get this great sense of the state of the world, because you find out what's going on with Atlantis. You see what's going on with the crime fighters against the superheroes. Like you see the difference between the two of them. You see that there's a meta-human bar, because you can't really tell the difference between the heroes and the villains there that are there at the bar. And then there's Lobo. And they're all there together, drinking and partying and trying to draw and quarter Plastic Man. I mean, it's just, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's like spring break in Daytona Beach. There at that bar probably all the time. Like, you just get this wonderful sense of the world and what it's going on. And I love that about this issue. Even though we don't necessarily get new name. Well, they start finally kind of giving names to people, because you find out about the Americommandos. I guess that's really kind of the only thing I can think of off the top of my head that actually is named. But anyways, you're starting to see this. Like, you find out for sure that Nightfire is in fact the daughter of Dick Grayson, and you can tell that she is the daughter of Starfire because of her powers, and Mr. Miracle and Big Barda's daughter is dressed in Mr. Miracle's uniform. I mean, there's this issue and this series as a whole as well, just exudes the love of these people's love of superheroes and the DC universe. And you can just tell that there's, I mean, it's just amazing to see this. So I'll give the issue perfect 5. So as we wrap up, if anyone has questions for us about biblical lessons that we've talked about in this episode, or other discussion anything ranging from anime, comics, or anything in general, feel free to reach out to us and email us at frickityfracktalkback@gmail.com, or reach out to us on Twitter at frickityf, or frickityfrack on Instagram and Facebook. So feel free to email us, and we'll love to answer your questions.
And so just remember that you are loved and Jesus loves you, and we love you as well. And check us out, same bad time, same bad channel.